when the situation along the LAC remains volatile, the closest the two countries have come to an armed conflict since 1962. Indian troops have been put on the highest level of alert. This as the PLA tries every trick in the book to intrude. The Indian Army has also now deployed special mountain forces at friction points. Our correspondent Abhishek Bhalla is on ground zero in Ladakh and tells you exactly what's happening on the LAC. Take a look.
Indian Army is in a state of highest alert along the line of actual control. Defences have been ramped up with special mountain warfare forces deployed at all friction points along the LAC.
At a time when the talks are on to de-escalate the situation, the Chinese troops are creating another friction point south of Pangansong.
The Chinese have made multiple attempts to dislodge Indian troops from the heights they are holding. The mountain warfare forces have been added on the Pangong Lake's north and south banks to support the Special Frontier Force, which brought the strategic heights firmly under Indian control.
दक्षिण पंगोंग सो लेक में चीन की फौज ने कोशिश की ऊपर आने के लिए जहां भारत की फौज थी उनको पता चल गया और एसएसएफ स्पेशल सिक्योरिटी फोर्स कर्नल जमवाल वो जो ट्रेन होते हैं चक्राता में एस्टेब्लिशमेंट 22 खुफिया जगह है वो थे उधर उन्होंने भारत की मदद की और उन्होंने चीन को ढकेल दिया.
In another big move, the Indian Army has put barbed wire as obstacles at heights under its control to discourage PLA troops from trying to cross the line. Tensions at the LAC are at its highest since the 1962 war, with both India and China setting up major build-up tanks and infantry in the eastern Ladakh sector. But India's aggressive stance has sent a clear message to China. Its sinister expansionist plans won't work.
The situation on the line of actual control has been described as a state of highest alert, and those tracking developments on the ground say a small spark can lead to things completely spiraling out of control. Over the last few days, the Indian forces have seen Chinese movement and mobilization, and in some friction points, the troops are only meters away with heavy arms, making the situation extremely fragile. With camera person Satya, Abhishek Bhalla in Leh for India Today.
And the meeting between the Chinese and the Indian foreign ministers has begun in Moscow. This critical meeting that could decide whether the two countries are able to disengage or whether war is inevitable. The big questions: will last-minute diplomacy prevent an armed conflict between India and China? Is the flare-up on the LAC imminent and, as some analysts are saying, inevitable? Will China give up occupied Indian territory? Can India hold on to the heights that they now control? These are some of the questions I'll ask three experts who are joining me today. Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, former GOC Northern Command, so knows the area like the back of his hand. Vijay Nambiar, one of the country's most distinguished diplomats, former envoy to China. And Professor Bharma Chilani, strategic affairs expert who has tracked China for years now. Appreciate these three fine minds joining me right at the very top. Let's ask that big question. Am I right, Brahma, in suggesting that this meeting between the Indian and the Chinese foreign ministers now is critical to avoid an armed conflict? Has it come down to that?
It's critical, but neither side wants a war. The situation has gone from bad to worse because of the collapse of the disengagement deal India's NSA concluded with China's foreign minister, Wang Yi, who's also a state councillor and special representative. Jaishankar is holding talks with Wang Yi this evening. It's the same gentleman who concluded that deal with Ajit Doval. Under the deal, India created buffer zones, as in Galwan Valley, Hot Springs, and Gogra. but China failed to honor the deal. In fact, it used the deal to rush forces into Devsan, where it has occupied the critical Y junction, which controls access to several areas. Devsan is of utmost importance to Indian defenses. India is facing, as you know, two major crises at the moment: a fast-growing COVID crisis and a deep slump of the economy. This is the greatest ever contraction of the Indian economy. And on top of that, we have a third crisis, the China crisis. So this is a terrible time for India for a war with China. But for China also, this is a bad time to start a war against India. China has invited an international backlash against its expansionism and muscular policies. Such a war against India will only cast greater unfavorable light on China's expansionism.
So you're saying both the countries would ideally like to pull back. Vijay Nambiar, given what Professor Brahmachelani is saying, the two countries want to pull back. Do you see diplomacy still working? It hasn't worked over the last 4 months. There have been different efforts made behind the scenes, but they haven't worked. What makes you believe, or do you believe that things could get different, that Moscow could be the place where this chill could finally be, where we could finally witness a thaw?
I agree that on the military side, there is really, the situation is on a knife edge. And also that diplomatically, the level of trust is absolutely low. But at the same time, I think, and I recognize, both sides recognize that going to war is not the solution. And therefore, I think the first biggest priority for the foreign ministers meeting is to try and ensure that there is no further escalation of the situation now. The question of de-escalation can come only after that. The first thing is to avoid further escalation through any kind of military action, retaliation in South Pangong to reverse the proactive action which was taken by the Indian Army as a response to the earlier actions after Foreign Minister Wang Yi himself had suggested that there should be. So in some ways, I think there is a danger of provocation at any stage. The protocols can easily be breached. What people need to ensure and the foreign ministers need to address is there is no further escalation at this stage. Then after that, I think they would have to address, if there is some agreement and on that, they will have to address, while the military standoff remains, how to try and have non-military areas to defuse the atmosphere.
So what you're saying is this meeting first target is to prevent further escalation, de-escalation takes place in stage 2. Given that, General Huda, former GOC Northern Command, the fact is there are heights where the two armies are now 300 meters away from each other. And we have had firing for the first time in 45 years 2 days ago. Given what you are hearing from the ground, what we are hearing from the ground, the situation could easily spiral out of control. Is it possible to prevent further escalation, given that each side seems keen to retain this territory that they have, and the Chinese want to get back some of those heights that reportedly we have got in the last few days?
So Rajdeep, I agree with earlier, panelists who say that both countries don't want to go to war. The fact is, situation on the ground, military to military, what is happening on the ground has a life of its own. And therefore, despite all our best intentions that, matters should not escalate, as long as there is no breakthrough in the deadlock that has happened, as long as there is no move forward on the disengagement process, I'm afraid, despite all that we wish for, the situation on ground is a hair trigger. Please look at, what soldiers on the ground and the young company commanders would be feeling. They've occupied dominating heights in the South Bank. The Chinese obviously want them to go back. there is a huge chance for miscalculation. It's now weapons free. The standard operating procedures have been revised. Thankfully, nobody's got shot and killed in fighting, but it could well happen. So I see, unless there is some kind of a breakthrough which gets translated on ground, and you see some kind of a disengagement process taking place, I'm afraid, despite our desires and wishes and intentions to not escalate the situation, things could go completely out of control.
Just for our viewers, 300 meters away from each other on the heights of eastern Ladakh, General Huda, what is the message to those military commanders on the ground? From your experience as former GOC Northern Command, when you say that, there could be, things could easily spiral out of control, is the message that we don't strike first, but if the Chinese were to once again resort to provocative actions, we have no choice but to hit back now?
See, Rajdip, I think we should see this, in light of what has happened. I was there during the Tumor incident, and we had, almost 1,000 soldiers on each side, facing off at a distance of 1 to 2 meters.
1 to 2 meters?
The difference in that face-off and this current situation, Rajdip, is that there was respect for agreements and protocols on both sides. That has completely broken down after what the Chinese did. Restraint on both sides is not there. As I said earlier, the standard operating procedures have been revised. If the Chinese attempt to do something, would the Indian Army soldiers on ground be even willing to accept the kind of thing that happened when these people intruded and got into our territory? So therefore, that's the reason I'm saying that things are, as somebody else said, things are at a knife's edge, and unless there is some substantive move, and the talks move forward, I think we could see. And what is there to prevent, any side from doing what has happened in the South Bank in some other area, open up another front? So I think unless there's a breakthrough, we are going to be, seeing some very tense military escalation happening.
Very tense military escalation is possible. You're the second General Huda. Last night I had General Panag, and he was also suggesting on similar terms that a military conflict may well seem inevitable. Vijay Nambiar, given that the army generals on the ground are worried about the situation escalating out of control, has the time come for Prime Minister Modi and President Xi, who supposedly had this special relationship, to pick up the phone and talk to each other? Why has that hotline not been activated? If the relationship between India and China at the top level between the Prime Minister and the President was so good, surely they could have worked towards de-escalation. But we haven't heard of that. The Mamalapuram spirit, the spirit of Ahmedabad, where the Chinese and Indian leaders were on a swing with each other, all that seems to have disappeared. Has the time come for the two leaders now to take the initiative? Are they ready for that?
I think this is just that step short of the top level. Clearly, Wang Yi is not in a position to be able to decide definitively on how trust can be brought back, if there is at all any possibility of that happening. Both sides will have to give face, as it were. They will have to do something that will keep keep the prestige intact, and therefore some bit of acceptance on both sides. Given compromise on both sides has to be done. And that cannot be done at this level. It can only be done at the top level. Clearly, the instructions on the military side have come from on top. And now, if there is any, at the military level, I think this standoff will remain. And the two foreign ministers will have to work just for that kind of a conversation at the top level to prepare the ground for some way in which the mutual kind of give face to each other at this level, and then slowly try to defuse the situation. And I think that kind of giving in to each other cannot happen at the military level at this stage. It will have to happen in the non-military level.
Yes, but the non-military level, does it, as you said, do the foreign ministers try and prepare the ground Mr. Nambiar, for the Prime Ministers to meet, for the Prime Minister and the President to talk to each other?
I think they will probably have to do that because I don't think at this level it can be resolved.
That is a very critical point you're making. Brahma Chilani, you want to dive in on that, that this will now have to be resolved with Prime Minister Modi and President Xi. Do they have it in them to restore, if they have such a special relationship, and Prime Minister Modi has been seen to have a special relationship with the Chinese leadership, is it time now for him to encash on that? He should be picking up the phone surely and speaking to President Xi if the two forces are on the verge of a military conflict, and which all of you are suggesting the two sides don't want.
If Modi had such a special relationship with Xi Jinping, would India have faced this kind of brazen aggression by China since April? If anything, Modi must be reeling from the trust that he had reposed in Xi Jinping. He met Xi Jinping 18 times. In fact, ever since Modi came to office, he bent over backward to placate China. He delisted China as a country of concern. He took several other steps, including ending official contact with the Dalai Lama. All these steps failed to appease China. And I think one most significant aspect about the current situation, which we tend to forget, is that this kind of aggression is very unusual. China has made land grabs below the threshold of armed conflict.
No, so therefore, sorry, Professor Chilani, to intervene. Therefore, how does that square up with your belief that the Chinese don't want a conflict? Who is to say they don't want it? Maybe they do want a localized conflict.
No, they have achieved broadly their territorial objectives below the threshold of armed conflict. They have also forced India to divert major resources to national defense at a time when the Indian economy has registered its worst ever contraction. Such diversion of resources dovetails with China's strategy to weaken and contain India. If they can continue to wage psychological warfare against India, if they can continue to tie down India while they maintain their territorial gains,
right,
they would have a win-win situation for themselves.
So you're saying it's two steps back, two steps forward, one step back. Is that what you're saying? That the Chinese have already taken the 2 steps forward. Now, whatever is happening is at best to take 1 step back, so they retain some of the gains they made in April, May.
Well, the fact is that India's official demand, as reiterated by the Indian Foreign Secretary just last week, is a return to status quo ante.
Yes.
Diplomacy will not deliver status quo ante to India. That is unmistakably clear. The Chinese have no intention of vacating the land grabs that they have made. And as far as military options are concerned, those options have increasingly become tougher for India because the PLA has massed almost 50,000 forces just on the Ladakh frontier. So the third option that India is not willing to undertake is to mount escalating costs on China, non-military costs, because India is in a position, given its buying leverage, the fact that the trade relationship is so lopsided in China's favor, and also given the fact that China is now facing growing international pressure, India can exercise its diplomatic leverage, its economic leverage, and mount increasing costs on China to end its aggression. That is the third option and the most credible option that India needs to exercise.
You know, but the fact is, General Huda, that we were told that in the last week itself, India has captured certain critical heights. I want to understand, does that not give us greater leverage when we are holding these talks? The fact that we have captured certain critical heights, or at least retained certain critical heights in the Kailash range, does that not give us greater leverage, sir?
So Rajdeep, just to step back a bit, and what Mr. Brahmachalani was trying to point out, if you look at the areas in which the Chinese initially intruded, mainly in the Pangong Tso and the Depsang area, these were areas that were considered as disputed. and they came into these areas, to establish their territorial claims, which largely they seem to have succeeded in doing that. Coming to, the south bank of Pangong, so I think we should look at this whole area not so much in geographical terms. There's just too much focus on, Blacktop and Helmet and these areas. I think we should look at it in psychological terms. And I think what the intention from at least the Indian side was to put some kind of psychological pressure on China that the current deadlock in talks and the Chinese just refusal to go back, from Pangong and Depsang area is not acceptable to us. Whether the psychological pressure plays out, how it plays out, escalation again has its own sort of dynamics. If there is a breakthrough in the talks, between the two foreign ministers, we could say that what India did, has given us an advantage. Will it lead to further escalation in different areas along Ladakh? It's an 800-kilometer LAC, Rajdeep. It's not held like the line of control. So will it see further escalation in other areas? And that's where my large concern, Rajdeep, is unless there is a breakthrough diplomatically, the military escalation cycle is something that you are going to, get involved in, and it could only, grow further.
That is extremely worrying. General Huda, what you've just told our viewers is extremely worrying. Unless there's a diplomatic breakthrough now, the military escalation spiral could rapidly go out of control. General Huda, Vijay Nambiar, Brahma Chelani, the three of you have given us, I think, a considered view here as to why we are possibly at the precipice. Not since 1962, perhaps, have we seen ourselves in this position. I appreciate the three of you joining us and giving us your expert opinion at the top of the news today. Thank you so much. Let's turn from the conflict, which is the serious one along the line of actual control, to the other conflict, which has all kinds of elements. Kangana Ranaut versus the Shiv Sena in Mumbai. Kangana Ranaut, the actor who seems to have decided to take on the Shiv Sena government, which in turn believes that she is little more than a BJP proxy. A day after her office was demolished, Kangana Ranaut continued to brazen it out, and she has decided to take on the Maharashtra government. Both sides are refusing to relent, even as the Bombay High Court today decided that the demolition process would be stayed till the 22nd of September. It's our other big story today.
As the Bombay High Court adjourned the matter of BMC's demolition of Kangana's office till the 22nd September. With status quo in place, a maskless Kangana under heavy media presence ascertained the damage done. The damage done also reflected in Shiv Sena's mouthpiece Samna. While Sanjay Raut had maintained the matter now lay with the state government, the banner headline of Samna, edited by Raut, screamed, "Ukhad liya," stating BMC's crackdown on illegal construction. However, the message was clear, a response to Kangana's tweet earlier, her challenging the Sena with "Ukhado, mera kya ukhadoge." The Shiv Sena now replying back with "Ukhad liya." Meanwhile, an FIR was lodged in Vikhroli against Kangana for using derogatory language for Maharashtra Chief Minister Uddhav Thackeray.
आज मेरा घर टूटा है, कल तेरा घमंड टूटेगा.
Unfazed Kangana bolstered her attack on Uddhav Thackeray, calling him a product of dynastic politics, charging him of ruining the legacy of his father, compromising on the ideology of Bal Thackeray and turning his party into Sonia Sena, going on to say that his father's goodwill could get him money but not respect. Politics, meanwhile, has exploded at the back of what was till now left to conjecture. Devendra Fadnavis, many central leaders, even the Himachal Chief Minister, has now come out in her support.
हिमाचल की बेटी कंगना रनावत ने सिर्फ अपनी आवाज बुलंद की और अपनी आवाज में कुछ बातों का जिक्र किया, जिसमें जो है प्रतिशोध की भावना, बदले की भावना से उन्होंने ये कार्रवाई की है।
While Union Minister Ramdas Athawale is meeting Kangana to pledge his support. The opposition has charged that Kangana has been a political pawn at the hand of BJP, and the language used by her reflected the same, referring to phrases like Sonia Sena, calling the Aghadi government Milawati Sarkar, talking of Kashmiri Pandits, even bringing in the Ram Mandir. Politics is clearly at play. Which way it turns is anybody's guess. The fight may have just begun. Bureau Report, India Today.
And a short while ago, we spoke to the Himachal Pradesh Chief Minister, who's also now dived into this conflict. Jairam Thakurji, we spoke to you a few days ago. You have come out openly in support of Kangana Ranaut. That is why people are saying वो BJP की proxy है. BJP is backing Kangana Ranaut to take on the Shiv Sena government in Maharashtra. सही है?
हाँ, निश्चित रूप से देखिए, पिछले कल से जिस प्रकार का घटनाक्रम घटित हुआ है उससे साफ जाहिर होता है कि उनको टारगेट किया गया है और एक लक्ष्य के साथ किया गया है, और उनकी एक नहीं बहुत सारी चीजों में उनको जो है वो उलझाना चाह रहे हैं, उनको फंसाना चाह रहे हैं। ये एक बड़ी सीधी सी बात सबके सामने दिखाई दे रही है, स्पष्ट दिखाई दे रही है। ऐसी सूरत में जहां तक हमारी हिमाचल प्रदेश की बात है, हम हिमाचल की बेटी के समर्थन में हैं, वो सुरक्षित रहें, हमारे लिए ये महत्वपूर्ण है। वो सुरक्षित होकर के अपने काम के लिए मुंबई गई हैं तो वहां बेहतर ढंग से काम कर सके, काम के लिए एटमॉस्फेयर मिले, वहां की सरकार की ये जिम्मेवारी है, उनको सुनिश्चित करना है। और दूसरे में ये भी मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि ऐसा करने की आवश्यकता आखिर पड़ी क्यों? इसमें सीधी सी बात लग रही है कि राजनीतिक मकसद के साथ जो है वो महाराष्ट्र सरकार काम कर रही है, एक एजेंडे के साथ काम कर रही है, और एक बेटी को परेशान करने के लिए जो है इस प्रकार से हथकंडे अपना रही है।
सर, आप कह रहे हैं महाराष्ट्र सरकार अपने एजेंडे पर जा रही है, दूसरी तरफ महाराष्ट्र सरकार कह रही है कंगना बीजेपी के एजेंडा पर जा रही है, और यह भी कहा जा रहा है कि आपने जिस तरह से उनको वाइस प्लस सिक्योरिटी की मांग, और वो मांग को तुरंत केंद्र सरकार ने माना, यह अपने आप में एक तरह से राजनीति है। व्हाई डिड यू हैव टू गिव हर वाई प्लस सिक्योरिटी?
देखिए, उनके कहने का विषय को कोई औचित्य इसलिए नहीं रखता है कि ऐसी परिस्थिति निर्मित करने के लिए हमारी भूमिका नहीं है, भूमिका उनकी है। आखिरकार आज कंगना के पक्ष में पूरे देश भर में सब लोगों ने आवाज उठाई है, और स्वाभाविक रूप से एक जिम्मेदार संगठन होने के नाते, देश का नहीं दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा राजनीतिक दल होने के नाते, हमको भी, हमारे दल को भी आवश्यक लगता है कि ऐसे में एक बेटी को अनावश्यक रूप से परेशान किया जा रहा है, बेवजह किया जा रहा है, ऐसी सूरत में उनका साथ होकर के, खड़ा होकर के उनके लिए मॉरल सपोर्ट देना चाहिए।
नहीं, ये आप मॉरल सपोर्ट कह रही है, ये खुलम खुला राजनीति है। क्या आप मानते हैं दिस इज नाउ अबाउट पॉलिटिक्स? ये राजनीति बन गई है, बीजेपी वर्सेस शिवसेना, एंड कंगना इज पार्ट ऑफ द बीजेपीज एजेंडा अगेंस्ट द शिवसेना। मानते हैं आप पॉलिटिक्स हैज ब्रोकन आउट?
नहीं, इसके पीछे देखिए, मैं बड़ा साफ जैसी बात, किसी का जीवन सुरक्षित रहना ये महत्वपूर्ण है, और वो हिमाचल की बेटी के साथ साथ एक फिल्म इंडस्ट्री में एक सेलिब्रिटी के रूप में भी है, और उनने अपनी इच्छा जाहिर की कि मुझे मुंबई बहुत आवश्यक कार्य से जाना है, और मुंबई की सरकार उनको धमकी दे रही है कि अगर मुंबई में आए, वहां पर महाराष्ट्र में आए तो आपको देख लेंगे। ऐसी परिस्थिति में सब लोगों ने अनुभव किया, पूरे सरकार ने, केंद्र सरकार ने अनुभव किया कि ऐसे में जो है वहां पर जो है उनको उनके जीवन के लिए थ्रेट दिया जा रहा है। कुछ भी घटना घटित हो जाती है, आखिर कौन जिम्मेवार होगा? तो प्रदेश सरकार ने, हमने हिमाचल प्रदेश में निर्णय लिया, उनके निवास पर सुरक्षा मुहैया कराई, और उसके साथ साथ में केंद्र सरकार ने, मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ होम अफेयर्स ने इस सारी थ्रेट को असेस किया। असेस करने के बाद निर्णय किया कि उनको सुरक्षा देना आवश्यक है, और इसी वक्त सुरक्षा देना आवश्यक है। और मैं इस बात को कहता हूं, मैं आदरणीय अमित शाह जी का भी आभार व्यक्त करता हूं, और खासतौर से इस सारे निर्णय के लिए, जो निर्णय उन्होंने तुरंत किया, जल्दी किया। आप कल्पना करिए, जिस हालात में कंगना रनावत मुंबई पहुंची हैं, अगर सुरक्षा नहीं होती तो क्या परिस्थिति वहां पर होती? उनके जीवन को सुरक्षित रहने की कोई गारंटी थी वहां पर? क्या वहां की सरकार तो इस पक्ष में नहीं है। वहां की सरकार क्या करना चाहती है, ये मंशा तो बड़ी साफ है। तो ऐसी परिस्थिति में मुझे लगता है कि जो भी निर्णय किया गया है प्रदेश और केंद्र सरकार द्वारा, वो बहुत उचित है, वाजिब है, और सही निर्णय लिया है।
Okay, Jairam Thakur, the Himachal Pradesh Chief Minister, speaking to us a short while ago. Let's turn from there to the other actor, Riya Chakrabarti, who will spend at least another night in Mumbai's Baikala prison. A Mumbai court hearing a bail plea deferred its verdict till Friday. In the court, the Narcotics Control Bureau has opposed its bail to Riya. The NCB says their probe into the drug link remains incomplete. Riya, on the other hand, has argued there is a threat to her life in judicial custody, and at no stage has she admitted to consuming any drugs. Riya also claims she was coerced by the agency into giving statements. At the Baikala jail, Riya is being kept in a separate prison cell on the ground floor. This is near the cell where Sheena Bora murder accused Indrani Mukherjee is also lodged at the moment. Now, amidst all of this, there are question marks. Kangana Ranaut and Riya Chakrabarti. Where does Bollywood stand? While voices are coming out slowly in support of Kangana Ranaut, what about Riya Chakrabarti? And why has Bollywood not taken a stand on both these actors in some form or the other? I'm joined by a special guest. I'm joined by one of the young stars of Bollywood. Kubra Said joins us. Appreciate your joining us, Kubra Said of Sacred Games fame amongst others. Appreciate your joining us. Why have the people in the top stars in a way in the Hindi film industry, or dare I say more people in the Hindi film industry, not spoken out, especially in Riya's case? There seems to be a veil of silence that has enveloped Bollywood. Why does nobody want to speak out? What do they fear?
Honestly, if I was on Twitter replying to this question, I would have only retweeted and quoted the tweet by saying +1. I don't understand it either. I think today we need each other to stand by each other in solidarity more than anyone else. I mean, I know that there was a wave where every actor, at least most of the actors, reposted the Producers Guild notice and hashtagged it with the words "in solidarity." Yes, that's the sentiment that we all share together, as we should, because we're in this together. Also, abolishing an industry by saying #boycott Bollywood is not the answer to anything, because boycott Bollywood. Bollywood is not a handful of actors. Bollywood is an industry that is serving meals and a family and a livelihood to several families who live in this city.
But that is why I'm precisely asking this question to you, Kubra. Why is it that when an industry is being described, let's say by one of your own, as a den of vice, that everyone is on drugs, nobody wants to speak out? Why is Bollywood today being intimidated by propaganda? Why is Bollywood scared? I come back to it. What are you scared of?
It's a very unfortunate space that we are in, to be honest, Rajdeep. Whoever speaks about it gets vilified. Whoever doesn't speak about it, we turn around and say, oh my God, but you're spineless and you didn't speak about it. So I think, as I always speak my heart and my mind out on social media, I'd like to say that I don't think I'm in any place or I have any demands from others who are not speaking at the moment. But of course, in my opinion, is it the right thing to do? No. Because if one person from our industry is suffering, then I understand that everybody is suffering. And the whole point is this is going to hit you sooner than you know. And it's going to be closer to your doorstep sooner than you know. And that is not when you can scream and shout and say, the wolf is here. I think you really need to speak up in solidarity, because someone is being vilified, someone is being wrongly, portrayed in the eyes of the media, and it's just such a huge circus. And when we aren't standing up for each other, then I don't know, in times of distress, I don't know who will ever stand up for me if, for example, I had to be in a situation like this. And that is a very scary thing, because when we move into Bombay, everyone, when the conversation started and we said, I love Mumbai, there was everybody who said one thing in common, and that was Mumbai feels like family. But if today people aren't standing up within the industry, then this is no family. And that is a bit unnerving in its own sense. And yes, it's disappointing, to say the least.
You're saying that in particular Riya Chakraborty, for example, has been vilified. Many have pronounced her guilty even without giving her a chance to speak or without the trial. Tell me an honest answer. If there was a bigger actor somehow involved in all of this, would things have been different? Is that how Bollywood works? That at the end of the day, if you're not an A-lister, people don't come out and speak?
What if I had to ask the question if this was a bigger or a male actor? Then would we have done the same thing? Hasn't it happened with male actors where we have seen, media thronging outside courts and police stations? But it has never happened. It has never happened the way it has happened to a woman. It's never happened the way it has happened to a young girl. It has never happened to somebody from our industry who has been subjected to misogyny and patriarchy, and purely on the basis of what the media has chosen to showcase through prime time. I mean no offense when I say this, but honestly, there was a tweet of you speaking with Riya, and I actually retweeted that, and I questioned you. I said, why do you have to grill her? And I understand, but you were probably one of the channels who actually brought her into conversation to hear her part of the story. And up until that moment, no one had cared to listen if she had anything to say or not. We were already deciding, what are the shamanic verses we are going to scream and shout and see her burn.
So, are you saying that you see a hint of misogyny? That what has been, because some of you I have seen now are wearing t-shirts saying, let's smash the patriarchy. Do you think that Riya has been a soft target because she is a woman? I mean, is that a fair way to take this debate forward?
Yeah. I'm asking you this, if this had to be reversed for half a second and Riya would have passed away and Sushant would be alive, do you think we would have gone through the same kind of a media circus? Ask ourselves, and honestly, let's just think about it for a moment, and I'm pretty sure that the answer would be no. More importantly, we have started to ignore, not even started to ignore, we've conveniently chosen to ignore things that are more important for us to speak, to discuss, to question, as a matter of fact. We are not speaking about anything to do with what's happening with this country at this point. All we're speaking about is whether Sushant's untimely demise was a murder, was it an abetment to suicide, was there siphoning of money, was there, a mastermind of Bollywood? These are the things that we're discussing. And then on the other hand, we're discussing about a savior of Bollywood who happens to be a woman, and a woman who has achieved so much on her own merit. And she's recognized for her talent, her acting prowess. She has turned around and made this into another whole story. And literally today you switch on the television, you turn on your internet, you go into social media, that's all you read. You speak about two members of this fraternity that has managed to entertain you, move you, excite you, pay bills, create livelihoods, and be a part and coexist with the entertainment industry.
Are you saying, therefore, that if Kangana Ranaut is targeted and her house is demolished, Bollywood should speak out? That if Riya Chakraborty, in a sense, is subject to some kind of a witch hunt where she's pronounced guilty even without being allowed a fair trial, that Bollywood should speak out? That in a sense, Kangana and Riya both, in a sense, deserve some support if they are seen to be victims in some form of an abuse of power?
Absolutely. There are two ends of the coin. There are two different subjects, and everyone should support each other. And this is not about a male for a female or a female for a male. It's not gender biased. This is about good versus bad. You can always be right in your perspective through your intellect. My question is, am I causing someone distress by doing this? Ask yourself that. Ask yourself, do I care enough to screw things up by hurting somebody? Then don't do it, because that's in your control. And I don't think too many people have that responsibility right now. And it's very important to be kind and responsible at this point.
Kubra said, as I said, very few people are speaking out. I'm glad that you have. It's time more and more of you raise your voices whenever there is an abuse of power of any form. I might point out here that while Kangana Ranaut has got Y-class security, when Ria goes out, the media with no social distancing surrounds her. That's another story for another day. But Kubra said, thank you very much for joining me here on the news today. Let's take a break. On the other side, welcome back. Let's turn to our good news today story, and it comes from Odisha's Malkangiri district. Situated amidst the hillocks and dense forests, villages in a Maoist-affected area have got a mobile network for the first time ever. It's our good news today story, reported by our Bhubaneswar correspondent Sufyan.
It has taken nearly 25 years. The Maoist-dominated Swabhiman Anchal of Odisha's Malkangiri district has finally get mobile connectivity. People of the area, completely cut off with water bodies on 3 sides and forest on another, are now on the communication grid. The trial run of the mobile network has been successfully completed in Pipalapadar, Hantalgoda and Jantapai villages.
People are really overwhelmed by the availability of telephone facility in their locality, in this region. And the security forces, especially the Jawans whose family is spread across the country, are really excited that now they can talk to as well as see their near and dear ones using mobile phones.
Cell phone services will now benefit nearly 20,000 people residing in 150 villages along the Odisha-Andhra Pradesh border.
पहले यहाँ पर मोबाइल नहीं था, नेटवर्क नहीं था, कुछ भी बच्चों का पढ़ाई के लिए बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो रहा था. अभी नेटवर्क बन गया है. अब बच्चों ऑनलाइन क्लास भी, जो लॉकडाउन के बाद में ऑनलाइन क्लास चल रहा था, अभी बच्चे यहाँ पर ऑनलाइन क्लास भी कर पा रहे हैं.
टावर बैठने से हम लोग को फ़ोन से बात कर सकते हैं और दूर दूर अंचल से जो प्रॉब्लम होता था, अगर मेडिकल या कोई भी चीज़ होता था प्रॉब्लम, तो हम किसी से बात कर नहीं पा रहे थे. आज बहुत इतना कुछ हो गया है यहाँ पे डेवलप, इसकी वजह से हम लोग बहुत खुश हैं.
The region got its first road connectivity just 2 years ago when Chief Minister Naveen Patnaik inaugurated the Guru Priya Bridge and declared the region as Swabhiman Anchal after being liberated from the Red Rebels. With inputs from Mohammad Sufyan, Bureau Report, India Today.